was 25 years old. These are seasoned military leaders. They've got multi-billion-pound budgets. They've got thousands of flying hours. I'm not gonna convince them that I am more experienced than they are. One thing that I found helpful over time that has some good evidence behind it is a lot of us know we need other people's input in order to get better. So what we do is we ask for feedback. And the problem with asking for feedback is you end up with a bunch of cheerleaders and critics. The cheerleaders you don't fully trust because they see you through rose-colored glasses and they just applaud your best self. The critics are devastating. They attack your worst self. We want our coaches, people who see your hidden potential and help you become a better version of yourself. So how do you get your cheerleaders and critics to be better coaches? What you do is instead of asking them for feedback, you seek their advice. When you ask for feedback, people look at the past. If you ask for advice, they turn to the future and they become more specific and more actionable in giving you tips and suggestions. Go back to the military leaders that I taught who told me that they gained nothing from my session, but they hope I learned something. I've got a bunch of critics in that situation. They're demoralizing me. I want to give up. But I had committed to teach a second session for these military leaders. And it was about a week later. I didn't have time to reboot all my content. And so I went to my critics and tried to turn them into coaches. And I asked them for advice on what to do differently in the next session. And one of them said, a big mistake I made was I led with my credentials. I tried to convince them that I was an expert. Well, I was 25 years old. These are seasoned military leaders. They've got multi-billion-pound budgets. They've got thousands of flying hours under their belts. They've got Top Gun-style nicknames. I'm not gonna convince them that I am more experienced than they are. And this one person said, you should try calling out the elephant in the room. Be a little more vulnerable. So I walk in the next week, I look out at the room, and I say, all right, I know what you're all thinking right now. What could I possibly learn from a professor who's 12 years old? Silence. And then one guy, call sign Sandoon, jumps in and he says, that's ridiculous. You gotta be at least 13. They all burst out laughing. It broke the ice. I more or less taught the same material. But the feedback was much more positive afterward. They told me that although I was junior in experience, I dealt with the evidence in an interesting way, and they liked learning from somebody who was almost as young as the millennials they were trying to lead. And I learned from that experience that the very people it felt like they were trying to take me down, if I asked for their advice instead of their feedback, they actually gave me a tip that built me up. I actually do this in my own classroom. I read students some of the toughest feedback I've gotten in my career. When I read those comments out loud, afterward, I hear much more honest input from my students. They tell me things that they think are not going well in my class. They give me new ideas for improvement. And I think what I've done there is I'm showing that I take my work really seriously. I don't take myself that seriously. I have to say, a lot of people get the concept but are afraid to do it because they don't want to admit what they're bad at to the people who work with them. Well, guess what? The people you work with every day, they already know what you're bad at. You can't hide it from them, right? So you might as well get credit for having the self-awareness to see it and the humility and integrity to admit it out loud.